Snow covered the battlefield like a burial cloth. The air smelled of smoke, iron, and death. Everywhere you looked, there were broken walls, shattered trees, and frozen bodies, half buried in white. This was the Eastern Front of World War II, where mercy did not exist, only survival. And in the middle of this hell stood one man, alone, surrounded, outnumbered. This is the story of the moment when a single soldier turned despair into legend. Scene 1. Completely surrounded. The year was 1943. A small Soviet-held village had fallen into chaos. German forces had pushed forward with overwhelming strength, tanks, machine guns, and infantry closing in from every direction. One by one, Soviet soldiers fell. Entire units were wiped out. And finally, there was only Sergeant Ivan Petrov left standing. His radio was destroyed. His squad was dead. His ammunition was almost gone. German soldiers slowly tightened the circle around him. Boots crunched in the snow. Rifles clicked into position. A German officer shouted in broken Russian, "You are surrounded. Throw down your weapon and surrender." Ivan looked around. There was nowhere to run. He checked his rifle. 7 bullets. That was all he had left. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Surrounded means they can't escape either." Scene 2. The burning tank. Suddenly, boom! A thunderous explosion shook the ground. A German panzer tank, positioned near the village square, was struck by Soviet artillery from miles away. The tank burst into flames. Black smoke poured into the sky. Fire crawled across its metal body. German soldiers panicked, scrambling for cover. To them, the burning tank was just another piece of wreckage. To Ivan, it was an opportunity. His eyes locked onto the tank. He tightened his grip on a grenade, and then, without hesitation, he ran straight toward the fire. Scene 3. Madness or brilliance? Bullets ripped through the air. Snow exploded around his feet. German soldiers shouted in disbelief. "He's insane! He's running toward the tank!" Ivan leapt onto the side of the burning panzer. The metal scorched his gloves. Flames licked at his uniform. Smoke burned his lungs, but he climbed higher, ignoring the pain. He pulled the pin and shoved the grenade inside the tank's open hatch. A heartbeat of silence. Then, boom! The tank erupted from within. Its turret was blown apart. The crew inside was instantly vaporized. And in the chaos of the explosion, Ivan jumped down, straight into the middle of the German lines. Scene 4. One man becomes a nightmare. What followed was not taught in military academies. It was raw survival. Ivan grabbed a fallen German soldier's machine gun. He opened fire. One enemy fell, then another. Then another. German soldiers screamed in confusion. "Russians are inside the perimeter. We're under attack." But there was no Soviet unit. There was only one man. Ivan moved constantly. He fired. He ran. He vanished into smoke and ruins. Every time Germans thought they had him, another soldier fell. He used bodies as cover. He used shadows as shields. He used fear as a weapon. A grenade flew into a bunker. Boom! 8 soldiers inside were gone. Another grenade, another explosion. Panic spread like wildfire. Scene 5. 20 minutes of hell. Petrov. Machine guns fell silent, their operators dead. Officers shouted orders that no one could follow. German troops began firing wildly at shadows. Ivan's hands trembled from exhaustion. Blood soaked his coat, some of it his own, but he did not stop. He could not stop, because stopping meant dying. Scene 6. Kill him at any cost. A German commander finally understood the truth. This was not an ambush. This was not a unit. This was one man destroying their position. He screamed into his radio, "Find him! Kill him at any cost!" 10 soldiers advanced together, weapons raised. Ivan saw them coming. He reached into his pocket. One last grenade. He waited. Closer, closer. Then he threw it. Boom! When the smoke cleared, no one was left standing. Scene 7.
The final bullet. Silence returned. Ivan leaned against a shattered wall, his vision blurred. He checked his weapon. One bullet left. Then he heard breathing behind him, a German sniper. Their eyes met. Time slowed. Ivan turned, pulled the trigger. The sniper collapsed into the snow. The 50th enemy fell. Scene 8, when the guns stopped. Moments later, a horn echoed across the battlefield. German retreat. They believed a full Soviet battalion was approaching. They ran. When Soviet reinforcements finally arrived, they found something unreal. Dozens of German bodies, a destroyed tank, and at the center of it all, one man, Ivan Petrov, collapsed.
Barely alive. Scene 9. The count. Officers surveyed the field. They counted the dead. 20, 30, 40. When the number passed 50, no one spoke. One officer finally said, "This is the work of an entire unit." But the evidence said otherwise. Every movement, every firing position, it all led back to one soldier. Scene 10. Enemy reports. Weeks later, captured German documents revealed something chilling. Their report stated, enemy resistance was extreme, estimated Soviet force at least 1 battalion. They never knew the truth. They were defeated by one exhausted, wounded man. Scene 11. The war inside. Ivan survived, but the war did not leave him. In the hospital, he woke up screaming. Explosions echoed in his dreams. Faces stared at him in the dark. A nurse once asked, "Are you afraid?" Ivan replied quietly, "I'm afraid of what would have happened if I had stopped." Scene 12. The medal. Months later, in Moscow, Ivan stood before generals and officials. He was awarded Hero of the Soviet Union. Applause filled the hall, but Ivan did not smile. He remembered the snow, the fire, the screams, and the men who never went home. Final words. Outro. History often talks about armies, about numbers, about strategies and maps. But sometimes history is written by one man who refuses to fall. A man surrounded by enemies, a man who climbed a burning tank, a man who stood alone and made the enemy run. Some battles are not just won, they are remembered forever. The war did not end in a single day. It dragged on, swallowing cities, nations, and generations. Ivan Petrov returned to duty after months of recovery, but something in him had changed forever. He followed orders, he fought when required, he survived. But the man who jumped onto a burning tank never truly left that battlefield. Other soldiers whispered about him. Some called him the ghost of the snow. Others said he was not human, that fear itself avoided him. Ivan ignored it all, because heroes rarely feel like heroes. They feel tired. Scene 14. The weight of survival. Years later, Ivan would admit something he never said out loud during the war. Survival was heavier than death. Every medal reminded him of those who did not return. Every salute echoed with names he could no longer remember clearly, only faces. At night, he still smelled smoke. He still heard boots crunching in the snow. The war had ended on paper, but inside his mind, it continued without mercy. Scene 15. A question from a young soldier. One evening, a young recruit approached him. Wide eyes, clean uniform, no idea what war truly was. The recruit asked, "Sergeant, how did you fight when you were surrounded?" Ivan stayed silent for a long moment. Then he answered, "I didn't think about fighting. I thought about not dying on my knees." That was the only lesson he ever taught. Scene 16. History tries to forget. As decades passed, the world moved on. New wars began. New heroes were created. Old stories faded. Ivan Petrov's name appeared only briefly in history books, a paragraph, sometimes just a footnote, because stories like his were uncomfortable. They proved that courage does not always come from power rank, or numbers. Sometimes it comes from desperation. And the world does not like to remember how fragile it truly is. Scene 17. The Memorial. At the edge of that ruined village, long after the snow had melted and returned many times, a small stone memorial remained. No statues, no grand speeches, just a simple inscription. Here, one man stood when retreat was easier. Most people walked past it without stopping, but those who knew stopped and stayed silent.
The truth about legends. Legends are not born from strength alone. They are born when fear is ignored, when pain is accepted, when surrender is refused. Ivan Petrov did not change the war, but on that frozen day, surrounded by enemies and fire, he changed what one man could be. And sometimes that is enough to echo through history forever.